A verbal stimulus that evokes a written, typed, or finger-spelled response is taking dictation. Assessment that acknowledges complex interrelations between environmental and behavioral. Ecological assessment. Interview rating scales or questionnaires used to identify the maintaining reinforcer of problem behaviors and indirect functional assessment, serving the same purpose as functionally equivalent. Indirect procedures to identify and define the target behaviors, behavioral assessment. Antecedents and response share the same sense mode and resemble each other, formal similarity. The degree to which studies' findings have generality, external validity. Steady state strategy, repeatedly implementing a condition to reduce extraneous variables. Ruling out simple before moving to complex explanations is parsimony. Multiple baseline designs applied to different locations. Multiple baselines across settings. A systematic approach to understanding the network's phenomena of science. The prior level of responding cannot be reproduced. Reversibility. Someone who engages in verbal behavior. Speaker. Responsible by a verbal SD with no point-to-point correspondence is intraverbal. Behaviorism that understands the human behavior, including private events. Radical behaviorism. A duplicate where the form of motor response is under the control of a visual verbal SD with formal similarity. Motor imitation. Person who reinforces the speaker's behavior is a listener. Control comparison of the DB under the IV is experiment. Data that is not trending upward or downward is stable baseline. A philosophical approach that views behavioral events that cannot be observed outside the realm of science. Methodological behaviorism. Natural science approach to the study of behavior is experimental analysis of behavior. The observation affecting the behavior being measured is reactivity. Using reversal logic to compare the effects of two or more conditions. Multiple treatment reversal design. Only behavior likely to produce naturally occurring reinforcement should be targeted. Relevance of behavior rule. Variation where a baseline and or intervention starts and other legs are staggered. Delayed multiple baseline design. Each session of the FA is terminated when problem behaviors occur. Latency-based analysis. Latency-based functional analysis. Higher order verbal clusters combining speaker and listener repertoires by directional naming. Objective observation of phenomena. Empiricism. Exchanging the reinforcement contingencies for two different responses. Contingency reversal. Interaction between a speaker and a listener is a verbal episode. A single antecedent variable affects the strength of more than one person. Divergent multiple control. Experimental design with baseline intervention baseline. ABA design. Repeating conditions in an experimental replication. Demonstration with a functional relation between environmental variables and behavior is a functional analysis. Attack that occurs as a result of stimulus generalization is attack extension. Responsible by a verbal SD with no formal similarity, but there is point-to-point correspondence is textual. Likelihood that a target behavior will occur in each circumstance. Conditional probability. A behavior that exposes learners to new environments is a behavioral cusp. Verbal behavior where the listener is affected by a specific response. Topography from the speaker. Topography based. Recording the extent to which a behavior occurs more often at some time than others. Scatterplot recording. Experimental arrangements, dependencies, and consequences, functional analysis. Two interlocking levels of verbal behavior and one utterance. Autoclitic. A change in behavior attributed to only the manipulated event. Functional relation. Experiment to determine the effects of different amounts of an independent variable. Parametric analysis. Behavior whose reinforcement is mediated by a listener. Verbal behavior. A single component evokes a non-matching intraverbal response. Simple verbal discrimination. Behavior change that has maximum impact on access to reinforcers. Habilitation. Recording a descriptive temporally sequenced account of behaviors, antecedents, and consequences. Anecdotal observation. Direct observation of antecedent behaviors, consequences, in the natural environment. Descriptive functional behavior assessment. 5 different types of verbal behaviors. Elementary verbal operant. Repeating conditions to determine reliability. Replication. A faulty explanation of behavior that assumes an inner cause. Mentalism. Experimental design with baseline intervention, baseline ABB design. Demonstration that prior baseline trends would remain if not for the independent variable. Verification. Experimental control technique that uses NCR as control, non-contingent reinforcement and reversal technique. A pattern of responding without variation, steady state responding, the type of sequence of conditions in a study to draw conclusions. An experimental design. The subject behavior is a result of exposure to prior condition sequence. This design begins with the treatment condition BAB design. Synonyms with ABAB, withdrawal design. List of descriptions of skills and the conditions under which they should be observed. Behavioral checklist. Experimental design that alternates conditions to verify previous effects. Reversal design. A FA variation designed to increase efficiency. Interview informed synthesized contingency. Systematic process for identifying the purpose of challenging behavior. Functional behavior assessment. A statement of the predicted outcome. Prediction. A presumed but unobserved process. Hypothetical construct. Multiple probe variation of a multiple baseline with intermittent checks. Experimental design, where participants choose between options based on distinct cues and reinforcement. Concurrent chain design. Experimental design with changing successive criterion for reinforcement or punishment. Criterion design. Continually questioning truth and validity of science. Philosophical doubt. A single verbal response is a function of more than one variable. Convergent multiple control. A discrimination in which a verbal stimulus alters the functions of another stimulus. Verbal conditional discrimination. A hypothetical variable that falsely claims to explain the observed phenomena. Explanatory fiction. Behavior changed by environmental variables independent of other people. Automatic contingency. 1 or 2 short sessions. Brief functional analysis. Verbal behavior with formal similarity under the control of a verbal ST duplicate. Belief of integration to maximum amount normalization. A FA where conditions occur during naturally occurring opportunities. Trial-based functional analysis. The truth of a statement depends on how effectively it guides action. Pragmatism. Target behaviors are appropriate and intervention procedures are acceptable. Social validity. Behavior that produces covariation and other untrained behaviors. Pivotal behavior. Members of a response class based on their common effect on the environment. Function-based definition. Defining behavior by shape or form. Topography-based definition. Data points that do not consistently fall within a narrow range. Variable baseline. Covert events accessible only to the person. Private events. Experimental technique that demonstrates the effects of reinforcement. DRI, DRA. Reversal technique. Verbal response is under the control of a verbal stimulus with point-to-point correspondence with no formal similarity. Is codec. 2 or more verbal SDs that each independently evoke behavior, but when combined evoke a specific response. Compound verbal discrimination. Multiple baseline designs apply to different participants. Multiple baselines across subjects. Experimental design to compare 2 or more conditions. Multi-element design. Improvements based on opportunity to perform. Practice effect. A variety of experiment designs that use baseline logic. Single case design. The philosophy of the science of behavior. Behaviorism. Vocal response evoked by a vocal verbal SD with formal similarity. Echoic. Assumption that the word is lawful and orderly. Determinism. A response evoked by nonverbal discriminative stimulus. Attacked. A verbal SD evokes a specific nonverbal behavior. Listener discrimination. Written response evoked by a written verbal SD. Copying text. A response of any form evoked by an MO and followed by a specific reinforcer. Mand. Multiple baselines apply to different behaviors of the same subject. Multiple baselines across behaviors. Any view ratings or questionnaires used to identify the maintaining reinforcer of a problem behavior. Indirect functional assessment. Assessment that acknowledges complex interrelations between environment and behavior, ecological assessment.